Hello, students. Today we are going to discuss the Buddhist theory of kingship. Under this topic, we are going to look into some of the important features of this theory. This unit would enable the readers to understand the origin of kingship, the theory of the great elect, which is Mahasamatta, the various features of kingship and the duties associated with it, the Buddhist Chakravarti king, and the first Chakravarti, which is King Ashoka. We are going to discuss some of the features of his rule also in this unit. So, Buddhism is a religion characterized by devoutness to Buddha, which means the enlightened one or the awakened one. Buddhism's teaching focuses on helping people first to develop compassion and empathy towards other fellow beings that would enable men to kind of get rid of the shackles towards their earthly attachment, which is the cause of all of men's sufferings. The knowledge of the teachings of Buddha is based on several tenets of scriptures derived from the early Sanghas oral transmission of teachings from one generation to another. In this context, one of the important Buddhist texts is Digha Nikaya. Agana Sutta is another important unit of Digha Nikaya, which is number 27. To begin with, we will look into some of the details of the Digha Nikaya text. The various narratives found in the discourses of Buddha regarding the origin of government in ancient India and the divine origin of the kingship are outlined in the Buddhist text of Digha Nikaya. This text is a section of Sutta Pitaka, which in turn is a part of the three Pitakas or the baskets. The three Pitakas contains within themselves the Sutta, which is the sermon, Vinaya, conduct, and Abhidharma, which is metaphysics. The Digha Nikaya collection specifically contains dialogues of Buddha. There are 180 dialogues. The first dialogue is the Brahmajala or the perfect net. It also contains 62 hypotheses and 4 great Nikayas or collections. The first 2 Nikaya of the collection is called Digha and Majjhima, which is longer and shorter discourses. The Digha Nikaya presents the earliest theory of the social contract to institute a ruler called the Mahasamatta or the great elect. Here in this text, we find that Buddha himself is the speaker in conversation with his principal disciples. Now we move on to the details of Agana Sutta, which is number 27 of Digha Nikaya. Agana Sutta of the Digha Nikaya begins by portraying the ideal world of natural existence. Human beings live in bliss and does not discriminate between polar opposites in this natural existence. It means that there is no such thing as male or female, rich or poor, evil or good, or subject and ruler. This blissful golden age comes to an end because of the karma of men from the earlier world cycle. During this long period of moral decline, social evils like greed, theft, sex, violence, and murder are included in the social structure. Finally, the world falls into the pit of chaos and anarchy. And in order to put an end to all these evils, human beings come together to select from among themselves a king to rule over them and maintain civil order. The king here is the Mahasamatta or the great elect. Men also agreed to pay him a portion of their rice in exchange of the function that the king would perform, that is, to look after the law and order and provide protection to the population. You know, Angada Sutta kind of reflects what we have already studied in the Hobbesian state of nature or social contract. So they are very similar, and we find that Buddhism has kind of presented this theory way before Hobbes has. So it can be said that, we can trace the origin of the social contract to Indian political thought, or specifically Buddhist political thought. Now, we move into the main focus of this paper, which is the origin of kingship. To begin with, Ernest Gellner mentioned three main historical stages of the evolution of mankind: hunter gatherer, agrarian society, and industrial society. These three societies can be defined in relation to the means or the absence of producing, accumulating, and storing food and wealth, the forms of coercion and legitimization that accompany them, to the social distribution and varieties of cognition or reasoning that involves human beings. So, the context of the origin of the theory of kingship is found scattered in the Pali scriptures. Its origin can be traced to the idea of a quasi contractual agreement under which the king agrees to perform specific functions on behalf of the people in return for certain rights conferred on him, including taxation. The view of kingship is not that of a universal emperor. It kind of focuses on the king as a great appointee and not the Buddhist Chakravartin. So here the king is not a universal emperor, but rather he is an appointee of the people. The basis of kingship involves rational deliberation of men rather than the divine will. It shows new territory of social investigation because it reflects that when social stratification was absent, the society or the state of nature was a blissful one, or it was full of happiness. The first stage, when beings were made of mind, depicts the influence of traditional Hindu psychology. The subtle body is individual's real personality and accompanies soul in its transmigration. Corporal body destroys the instrument of action of soul and the subtle body. It denotes emancipation of Upanishadic self or Purusha of the Samkhya view. The theory of the origin of kingship denotes the whole chain of causation from ignorance to suffering. Once ignorance is dispelled, individuals are able to see things as they are. The theory do not, however, specify the nature of the Mahasamatha or the great elect, in the sense that it does not say whether Buddha was focusing on a monarch or a republican head. This is because there is always a dichotomy in his theory of kingship, because Buddha himself was from the Sakya clan, which was a republican polity. Also, religious organizations founded by Buddha was based on the model of republican polity, where members were encouraged to express their view freely. Also, decision making involved some amount of consensus. However, the emergence of private property as a cause of the emergence of state and the production and accumulation and surplus were connected processes. Many factors were behind the increase in food production. Earlier dominant barley was substituted with high yield crop, that is rice. And this process led to the production, increased production, and accumulation of food grains, which is also known as hoarding. Once this process was started, it kind of included a lot of competition and enmity among people, the rise of urban centers, and the change in the production process. Passion of vanity, conceit, lust, greed, theft, desire necessitated a coercive authority of the state. The great elect was instituted by the people to settle social conflict. Political authority lies with people who fix the king a portion of their produce. The contract is a basis for the existence of the state. For, in the absence of such a contract, before the birth of the state, anarchy prevailed. It is therefore existential, and neither the subject nor the ruler leave any choice outside of it. So the state here is a sovereign entity, and its sovereignty is expressed by a variety of terms such as Ana, Adhipeka, Ishariya, Vasa, and Siri. The righteous king, which is the great elect or Mahasamatta, possesses 7 great treasures. These are the Chakraratna, which is the wheel treasure, also called the dominion. Second is the Hathi Ratna, elephant treasure, which is necessary to maintain the control over the dominion. Third is Asaratna, which is the horse treasure, again necessary to maintain control over the dominion. Fourth is the Paryankana Ratna, which is the counselor treasure, which is again necessary to control the dominion. Ithi Ratna is women treasure, which is the basis of control. Mani Ratna, precious gems, again the basis of control. And Gahapati Ratna, which is people and taxation, again which is the basis of the control. So these 7 treasures that the king possesses are necessary element in order to maintain his control over the functioning of the state or the dominion. These are unique to Buddhism and are known as Shataratna. The state arises as a punitive institution charged with the responsibility of imposing law and order, without which human beings cannot survive as an orderly society. The state becomes an agreement between the government and the ruled, wherein the ruled transfer a part of their sovereignty to state for a specific purpose. The relationship between the state and the subject is a contractual obligation in which one commands and the other obeys. The obligation is mutual, and if one party violates it unilaterally, the other is no longer obligated by the terms of the contract. So therefore, the contract symbolized by the institution of taxation, which is a payment for specific work. So here the contract is a kind of an agreement between the king and the subjects. And the subjects kind of instituted the king for the protection and maintenance of law and order within the dominion. Now, the relationship between the king and the subject is consolidated by 3 important duties of the king. First is the royal protection, second is social protection, and third is punishment. Royal protection: subjects in the kingdom are provided with 7 royal protections from the king. They are: he provides people with protection, all the life within the state is guaranteed by the king. He also provides protection to the army. Therefore, it is not just the army who is responsible for the security of the state, but it is the king who is responsible for the protection of army as well as the people living within the territory of the Chakravarti kingdom. He also provides protection to the regional kings, and he also provides them with advices to refrain from certain activities that would lead to chaos and corruption within the kingdom. He provides protection to the villagers and town dwellers. He provides protection to Brahmins and householders. He also provides protection to Samana and Brahmins. And also, he guarantees protection of birds and beasts. Therefore, according to the 7 categories, not only the life of the people is protected, but also the life of animals is protected within the Chakravarti region. In the Buddhist Sutta, the very important phrase is Rakha Varana Gutti. The 3 aspects are Rakha, which is care. Care can be fulfilled when the citizen practice the following 4 important criteria: forbiddance or self-control. Second is non-violence. Third is loving and kindness. Fourth is compassion. A person who cares for others will be cared by others. Second is avarna, which is shelter. And here shelter simply does not mean housing. It also means clothing. Gutti is protection. Protection is described as protection from robbers and other hostile elements. The Chakravarti Sihananda Sutta also advises the regional kings to avoid wrong deeds like killing, stealing, committing adultery, telling a lie, and taking intoxicants. Moderation in consumption is also advised. Kingship, therefore, is closely associated with the idea of institutional punishment and maintenance of the civic order, because any extent of economic prosperity alone cannot prevent the desire of the people to engage in theft and economic misconduct. However, in Chakravarti Sihananda Sutta, it is said that theft for the sake of subsistence is not a theft. Here it means that if a person steals because this is the only way he would survive, then the person should not be punished. Buddha prescribed 3 behavioral principles for the Buddhist and the lay people. These are not to commit evil deeds, to perform good deeds, and to purify one's mind, as mentioned in Digha Nikaya. As activities, the 3 behavioral principles become observance of the 5 precepts or shila: giving, dana, and meditation, pravana. Observance of the 5 precepts means pledging to abstain from killing, stealing, committing sexual misconduct, speaking falsely and idle, and consuming alcohol and intoxicants. Meditation involves mindful attention to one's breathing or talking. Therefore, the ideal kingdom, according to the Buddhist, is a territory which is without thrones and untroubled. Men are happy and joyous, living in homes with open doors and playing peacefully with children in their laps. Wicked are punished. Punishment is to be used to deter the potential offenders. Kings to have absolute powers to banish culprits from his kingdom and also to execute the convicted criminals. Now we come to the idea of the great elect or the Mahasamatta. The description of primeval conditions, it kind of begins with the description of the state of nature that necessitated the creation or institution of the king. So this primeval condition is inhabited by beings made of mind, feeding on raptures, which is bliss, enthusiasm, and carried away in spirit. They are self-luminous, traversing the air, continuing in glory, only subtle body or mind, emancipating person, and there is no distinction of sex. So, this natural condition or the state of nature was full of beings made of mind. However, this entire situation started to become corrupted with greedy dispositions, decline of self luminance, manifestation of the sun, the moon, appearance of stars, night, day, month, seasons, air, etc., appearance of soil and rice. It sets boundaries. Once you're involved in production of any kind of crop like rice, you need to set or demarcate boundaries, your property. So this gives rise to the idea of private property, appearance of evil and immoral customs, one's notion of oneself, pride in beauty and conceit, sex differences. People are therefore divided on the field of rice. Stealing appeared, and punishment for crime and defiance of rules became important. People were agitated due to these evils. Those beings went to the being among them who was the handsomest, the best favored, the most attractive, the most capable, and said to him, "Come now, good being, be indignant, censure that which would rightly be censured, banish him who deserved to be banished, and we will contribute to thee a portion of our rice." The king consented to do so and was given a portion of rice. The king that was instituted by the people to do away with the evils was called the Mahasamatta because he was chosen by the people or the entire population. He was also named the Khattiya because of being overlord or Adhipati of the Kheta. He was also called Raja as he charmed others by norms and pleased the people with dharma. Dharma is now introduced as the basic constituent of the state. The king was assigned 3 duties: indignation, censure, and punishment. And the king is not just a law enforcer, but also provider of well-being of the people. The state is a sovereign entity, and its sovereignty is expressed by a variety of terms like we already discussed: Ana, Adhipeka, Isarya, Vasa, and Siddhi. Sovereignty connotes total authority, an ability to reward and punish, capacity to give orders and to take orders from none. The Chakravarti possesses 7 great treasures. These treasures we have already discussed in the origin of the kingship. The king is also responsible for the protection and well-being of the subjects, and at the same time ensure punishment of the wrongdoers. Now we come to the idea of the Buddhist Chakravarti king. The Chakravarti king literally means a wheel-turning sage king or a Buddhist sage monarch. Siddhartha Gautama, who later became the Buddha, was the individual of an aristocratic birth, the son of Subodhana of Kapilavastu and a member of Saikya clan. The royal astrologer predicted that Siddhartha was ordained for an illustrious career, that he perhaps would become a lord, a universal king, as king of kings or lord of men. As prophesied, Siddhartha would renounce the worldly life and become Buddha. Chakravartin, as a righteous king, was predominantly engaged with the society. The ruler was directly responsible for the conduct, all the essential elements of the society, including comfort and security of the state and its people. He was also responsible for the well-being of the Buddhist Sangha and the temples. Buddha's political views epitomized non-violence and focused on the role of reconciliation and harmony in foreign relations. Three characteristics of the ideal Buddhist ruler were: he would serve as a principal lay supporter of the Buddha's monastic community and teachings. He would have to work for the advancement of society and serve as a moral exemplar for the people. An ideal ruler had to adhere to the Buddhist own pacifist ways. Now we come to the Buddhist Chakravartin that we have discussed. The first Chakravartin was depicted as King Ashoka. Now Ashoka, he was again from the Mauryan dynasty. For him, the necessity of war and conquest was firmly ingrained in his mind. He succeeded his father, Bindusara, as the emperor of Mauryan dynasty in 273 BCE. However, no one knew specifically why Ashoka, left his illustrious career as an emperor and became a Buddhist follower. Some suggested that it was the Kalinga War which caused the death of thousands of people in action, made Ashoka realize how deplorable and painful war was. He was extremely saddened at the sight of numerous dead bodies and proclaimed his repentance by the beloved of the gods. As a Buddhist ruler responsible for the welfare of his people, Ashoka took up many public work in order to aid in assisting his people to practice the Buddhist Dharma. He banned the popular Vedic practice of sacrifice and limited the number of animals slaughtered for royal consumption to 3. He took an active role in matters of Buddhist Sangha. Some of the earliest ideas about how an ideal king should be come to us from the Jataka tales. Many of these tales explain what the Buddhist idea of kingship was. For instance, in the Dhumeda Jataka, we learn a king should be stern and endorse the use of violence to create a good society. In the Brahmadatta Jataka, we learn of a compassionate king. We also learn about the great king Mandita and his greed that ultimately led to his downfall. These qualities of the kings and the way they ruled ultimately became the pillars of Buddhist theory of kingship. To summarize our entire discussion, in the theory of kingship, the king is the result of a quasi-contract. He is appointed by the people as a protector of the realm. It is the duty of the king not just to spread dharma amongst his people, but also to protect the dharma teachings when the world gets immoral and people become inept of following Buddha's teaching. The king or the leader in the Buddhist scheme of things was not just a politician, but also a guardian of morality and ethics. The Buddhist king is not just brave, but also compassionate and empathetic to his people. The Buddhist ruler is also conscious of the brittleness of his rule and the dangers of overambition. With this, we kind of sum up our discussion on the Buddhist theory of kingship. Thank you.